Hello guys, welcome to our classes. Today we'll be studying the chapter, the fundamental unit of life, that is cell. We'll talk about cell in this lecture. So, cell was first discovered by Robert Hooke. Robert Hooke discovered cell in a piece of cork when he looked at that piece of cork under a microscope. Under a microscope, he observed some honeycomb-like structure something like this. So he named a single structure as cell. The question arises, why is cell known as the fundamental unit of life? This is so because every organism, every single living organism is made up of cells. And all the living processes such as metabolism, growth, reproduction are all performed by cells at the basic level. An organism could be made up of single cell or multiple cell. So based on the number of cells, based on the number of cells, an organism could be divided into unicellular and multicellular organism. So the unicellular organisms are made up of single cell. Okay, as uni means one or single. Uni actually refers to unit and unit means one. So we call it unicellular organism. Here multicellular organisms are made up of multiple cells. Okay, here also the term multi refers to multiple. Okay, the next point of difference is the unicellular organisms do not show division of labor, whereas multicellular organisms show division of labor. Now, division of labor basically means that in case of multicellular organisms, there are multiple cells, so different cells will perform different functions and will divide all their functions. For example, some cells will do respiration, some will help in circulation, some will help in digestion, etc. Okay, so we can understand this by taking the example of a family. We can consider cell as a single person. If it is a unicellular organism or a person lives on its own, a family of a single person, so that particular person has to perform all the functions for himself or herself. For example, he has to earn for his own, he has to cook food for his own, he has to do other household work for his own, he has to do cleaning for his own, etc. etc. Whereas a multicellular organism, or it will consist of, if we talk in terms of family, it consists of multiple members. So for example, in our own family, we have basically our mothers cooking food for us, our fathers going to job for earning money, and every member has a particular role, and so forth. So this is the division of labor among different types of organisms. They are only shown by multicellular organisms, and unicellular organisms do not show division of labor because they have to perform all the functions on their own. Okay, the next point of difference is injury. Injury to the cell leads to death in case of unicellular organisms, but injury to a cell do not lead to death in case of multicellular organism. Why is it so? Because in case of unicellular organism, they have a single cell, and if that particular single cell is injured, they'll die. In case of multicellular organisms, they have multiple cells. Even if a cell dies, its function could be performed by another cell of the same type. Therefore, injury to a cell do not lead to death in case of multicellular organisms. This gives us another point that unicellular organisms have short lifespan, whereas multicellular organisms have longer lifespan. Now, why is it so? This could easily be explained by the first point of difference. As the unicellular organisms are more prone to injury and more susceptible to injury rather, so they'll have a short lifespan, whereas multicellular organisms, if got injured, the function will automatically be performed by some another cell, so they'll not die and therefore they'll have longer lifespan. The next point is related to visibility. The unicellular organisms could only be seen under a microscope, whereas multicellular organisms are visible by naked eye. Okay, so unicellular organism has single cell, and a single cell has a very small size that you cannot see by a naked eye, whereas multicellular organisms are made up of multiple thousands and millions of cells, so they could be seen by the naked eye. For example, you can see an insect, you can see a human being, you can see a whale. All of them are made up of multiple cells, so they could be visualized and they need to be visualized under a microscope. You can also understand this by a short example, like if you are standing on a terrace and a single person is going, you may or may not notice that particular person, but if at a distance, and if a mob, a crowd of people, like hundreds and thousands, or even if 100 or 20, 30 people are going all together, you can easily see that a bunch of people are going. So this is about the difference among unicellular and multicellular organisms. Okay, this was based on the number of cells. Now, a cell could be prokaryotic or eukaryotic. Okay, so let me first break these terms for you. Okay, then we'll go to the point of differences among prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. What does prokaryotic is made up from pro and Prokaryotic, whereas okay, pro means primitive and karyon means nucleus. So if we talk about prokaryotic cells, they are primitive kind of cells, or they are made up of nucleus which is primitive in nature, whereas if we talk about eukaryotic cell, it is made up of U plus karyon. So here U stands for true and karyon stands for nucleus. So eukaryotic cells contain true nucleus, whereas prokaryotic cells contain primitive type of nucleus. Now, what about the nucleus? Okay, so nucleus is a part of cell that contains the genetic material of an organism, which is to be passed to the next generation. Okay, so the prokaryotic cells do not have a well-defined nucleus, or rather primitive type of nucleus. In case of eukaryotic organism, they have a well developed or true nucleus. Now, what will be a primitive nucleus, or well undefined nucleus, and what will be a well developed, well defined, or a true nucleus? So basically, in eukaryotic cell, the nucleus is bound by a membrane, whereas in prokaryotic cell, the nuclear material is not bound inside a membrane, it is lying free. If I represent it diagrammatically, suppose this is a cell. In case of the prokaryotic cell, this is supposed to be the nucleus, and this structure is known as nucleoid, the primitive nucleus. Primitive means old, primitive means prana. Okay. In case of eukaryotic cells, if we see the nucleus is membrane bound and the nuclear material is present inside a membrane. This is a true nucleus. Okay. Another difference is they are smaller in size, whereas eukaryotic cells are larger in size. They lack cell organelles. They contain cell organelles. Now, what are cell organelles? Cell organelles are subparts of the cell that perform different functions inside a cell. In case of a primitive cell or prokaryotic cell, no organelles are present, but in case of true eukaryotic cell, the organelles such as mitochondria, chloroplast, Golgi bodies, ER or endoplasmic reticulum, all these will be dealt with in further lectures, but for now you consider them as important components of a cell that help it to perform certain functions in coordination. Okay, so another point of difference is prokaryotic cells divide by the process of binary fission. Binary fission means a cell gets divided into two cells. Okay, so they divide by the process of binary fission, whereas eukaryotic cells divide by mitosis. Now, if we talk about cell wall, so the cell wall in prokaryotic cell wall is made up of peptidoglycan. Here, cell wall, if present, made up of cellulose or chitin. Why I wrote if present is because animal cells lack cell wall and they are eukaryotic in nature. Whereas plant cells contain cell wall made up of cellulose, fungi contain cell wall made up of chitin, and they all lie under the category of eukaryotic cell. So this is all for today's video, and in the further classes we'll be discussing about the organelles which I told you separately one by one. So all the very best. Bye bye.